If we were playing Jeopardy, it could go something like this. John McCain, Mitt Romney, Jeb Bush, and the governor. And then you'd beep in and you'd say, name clients or individuals who have relied upon the expertise of famed conservative political media consultant Mike Murphy, who joins me now. He's also the co-host of the popular Hacks on Tap podcast and one of the Republican Party's most successful consultants. It's great to see you. It's great to have you here. It's been far too long, and I love the piece that you authored that brings us together today.
Well, thank you. I'm a fan of the show. Best bumpers in town. And anyway, good to see it. It has been too long. Great to be here.
So here's the message. It's time. Everybody get out on the Republican side of the presidential race opposing Trump, except one. One should stick behind. And I want to build to this, Mike, as you wrote it. Let's talk first about Chris Christie. Is he the one who should remain, or should he get off the island?
No. Yeah, it's time to go. I love his riffs. I'm not a Trumper, never have been, but this is a practical business we're in, and Christie has no support. There's a lot to happen in the primary, but you won't beat Trump with 14 people. And well, Chris is pitching, hey, look out, I'm the next McCain in New Hampshire. When he ran in New Hampshire in 2006, people hated him. He came in sixth, below Rubio, below Bush, below Kasich. So the idea of a New Hampshire miracle is a pipe dream, and he doesn't have the campaign legs to go any farther. He is now in the way, and if he's serious about beating Trump, it's time to accept the verdict of the preseason and get the hell out of the race.
Okay, and by the way, you would know who might be the real McCain in the race and in New Hampshire because you were there.
I was in a chair next to him on a bus for 112 days. Yeah, I knew John very well. I was proud to work for him in 2000, a friend. And Christie doesn't have it. I wish he did. I don't want to see Trump win the primary for reasons of, well, democracy and the corruption of the Republican Party that I served loyally for decades. Christie, I'm glad he ran. He had the guts to run. A lot of guys don't. But the experiment failed. Get out of the way and let the winner of the preseason be the alternative to Trump, and that's another candidate.
Okay,
I can't do this reveal style, so I won't say yet.
Right. Okay, I can't make the argument. That Christie can win this thing because I don't believe it. But is there something to be said for leaving him as the burr on the saddle of Donald Trump because he's the only one who goes full frontal every opportunity he has?
Right. That's what I love about him, but he can do that in the earned media without having to be on the ballot and a dead letter box for 10% of the vote. You know, the way to beat Trump is beat him early. You got to wound him or hopefully beat him in the Iowa caucus, where he's doing about 40% now. I've seen polls in the 30s. He lost it to Cruz last time. And then you got to break him in New Hampshire and South Carolina. 1, 2, 3 knockout. Christie's in the way. He's going to give people who will not vote for Trump a reason to waste their vote in New Hampshire, and that is a problem.
Okay, how about Senator Tim Scott? The guy's got a favorability rating, as you point out, of nearly 70% in those early states. Surely Mike Murphy isn't thinking he should get off the island.
I am sorry. I was an early Scott booster because I think the party is dying for an optimistic conservative. Instead, he ran a message-less campaign that did not catch fire. He got his favorable up to 70, but only 5 or 7% of those convert into voting for him for president. So he's Ed McMahon, so he failed that test. And he's another problem. He'll poll some votes because the threshold question is, do you want Trump again or something new? So we need less something new choices. And Scott, I'm glad he ran. I had high hopes for him. They just canceled all their super PAC or most of it TV because the big donation they were counting on didn't show up. He's in the way. He says he'll go to Iowa, though I hear if he doesn't make the Miami debate on the 9th, he'll probably get out sooner. He ought to do that. Always get out when you're somebody and it means something rather than when you're roadkill after coming in 5th in Iowa. So Scott needs to get out of the way, too. He took a good try at it. I don't think the campaign was adroit, and there's no reason to be in the race.
Some credit Ron DeSantis for, quote-unquote, turning Florida red. He won a huge re-election. Surely you don't think he ought to get off the island?
He's the hardest one to convince because he can look at a few spectacles of support and convince himself to stay in. They're all very good at convincing himself to stay in. But the fact is, DeSantis, who started strong as the leading Trump alternative, very few people are for him. It didn't catch on. Latest Iowa poll, he's down about 15% from where he was before. He's dropped from about 20 to like 15. So his trend is down. He's in the way too. He's just not been a particularly powerful candidate. So, well, he has a long shot to be the final contender. I think he went from first to a weak second in the preseason. He should get out too.
Did I read this too quickly? Do you even deal with Vivek Ramaswamy?
No, I skip over him because every time I think of him, I have this urge to run out and buy a lot of flypaper. The guy drives me crazy. I don't think he'll ever get out because he's in business. He's not trying to be president. He's trying to get, a pundit career, books, refrigerator magnets, God knows what. But, I kind of like him in because his real shtick is I'm crazier than Trump. I'm pure. I'm young. So if he got out, I think most of his vote would go to the Donald. So I don't really mind him being in strategically.
So by process of elimination, we can conclude that famed conservative political consultant Mike Murphy thinks Nikki Haley is the one. She needs to stay in.
She's got the best shot at upending Trump, and she would win a general election. She would easily beat, I think, President Biden because of frustration people have over the economy that he fairly or unfairly is blamed for. Look, I'm not a big Nikki Haley fan. I've found her very cynical in her career. But compared to Trump, she's Gandhi, and she actually believes in the Constitution, and I'm for her. Now, I was critical at the beginning, but I'm in this to stop Donald Trump from getting into the Oval Office because that's a disaster for our democracy and a lot of other things. So why Haley? In the preseason, she has gone with less money and less early support farther than anybody else. She's the product that's selling the best. She has gone in the new Iowa Register poll from 6% to 16% in 30 days. I've seen that rocket fuel before. She did the best in the debates, particularly the first one. The non-Trump money in the party, which is significant, donors who give $3,000 or can raise $10,000, so it's a large number of people, started with DeSantis, then they went to Scott. Both campaigns failed to gain traction. Now they're with Haley. So she's got enough money to really do a good Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina campaign. She's a popular former governor of South Carolina, so if she gets going in the early states, she can finish Trump off in South Carolina, and she is the only one moving up in the polls significantly and quickly in Iowa and New Hampshire. She won the preseason. She earned that. We ought to get out of her way and let it be her versus Trump, because then she has a shot to capture the nomination.
You remind me that in 2016, I used to think if only the field would consolidate, if only they would leave it to John Kasich, I think was the person I was then touting and thinking could really go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. In the end, I'm not so sure that if that field had coalesced around one, that he or she could have really taken the nomination away from Trump. And in similar fashion, I'm not convinced. I grant you that at this moment in time, Nikki Haley is the strongest one on that stage politically to do battle with Trump. So I agree with Mike Murphy. But I'm not convinced that even if you put all the numbers that are remaining together, she'd have enough and could cross the finish line. Something else needs to happen. A shoe needs to drop.
No, I think it's a formula of things. CBS did a good poll in New Hampshire. Remember, these polls are the rearview mirror. Primaries move very late. I mean, if we were 8 years ago in the Republican primary in the preseason, it was Scott Walker who was ruling everything till right about now. So the polls predict what might happen tomorrow. This is a very dynamic process. You need a clearer field. You need Trump to keep declining. The CBS poll I mentioned said basically in New Hampshire, about 24% of the people are hard in for Trump. About 30% are against Trump. So you've got to simplify this to a binary equation. You need Trump to keep being crazy because the new Trump we have is not the 2016 Trump. He is older. He's ruled by grievance. He's lost his fastball. He's saying more crazy things, doesn't take pressure well. But you got to make it a binary question. People say, oh, Trump's at 41 in Iowa. It's true. That means 6 out of 10 caucus voters are looking for somebody else. So why give them 8 flavors? Now you're right. They never want to get out. in politics, it pays to keep going no matter what. It's kind of like the old Monty Python sketch with the Black Knight. Black Knight, hit me again, down to just a helmet on the floor. Oh, you think you got me, do you? But this is different. The stakes are higher. And the core rationalization behind every candidate who's not Trump is running is the party needs me, not Trump again. So if they believe that, they have to act on it now pragmatically, put the egos aside and get out of the way. And see if they actually meant it about the higher cause, rather than going into early states where they're going to get clobbered, but give Trump a way through them with a plurality, and then he'll run the table. If you don't stop Trump in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, he's rigged the Nevada caucus, but there are no real delegates there. It's done. It's done. He'll roll the thing. And so we got to get out now. You can't wait to lose. You've lost. Read the tea leaves and get out.
Mike, what of the idea? This is something that I kicked around with Mark Halpern. He's here on a weekly basis. Last Wednesday, we focused on the fact that the Israel-Gaza dynamic has changed something insofar as it's here to stay. It's not going to go away quickly. It's taking all the oxygen out of the room in terms of news reporting, and it denies the non-Trump candidates any opportunity they have for breakout. What's the impact of the war on the specific issue you and I are discussing?
No, I think that is a factor. Right now it's in the way, but we still have time. Primaries can do a lot in 30 days. We're talking about January here. This is really the beginning of the real primary season as we enter November. It's a problem, but I would argue it's a little better for Haley than the others. Because if you show Donald Trump a map of the Middle East, and I know people who had high-level jobs in the Trump administration who would not argue with this, he couldn't find the West Bank or the Hezbollah section of Lebanon on the map.
Right.
He can barely find Canada.
Right.
So as the stakes are rising, as we've got carrier groups close in, as we've got Hezbollah, which has the ability to commit terror acts in the United States, Haley is the candidate who's got the strongest pitch on foreign policy experience. So this is not a bad issue for her, but she does have the problem of breaking through. Though in the handicapping world, it has started. People saw that Iowa poll. They know you don't look at where they are. They look at where they were 30 days ago and who's moving, and it's all her. Same in New Hampshire, where I think she's clearly in second and moving up. Both states, traditionally New Hampshire, but also I believe this time Iowa, independent votes are important. In New Hampshire, they can be as much as 35, 40% of the Republican vote, and there's not a lot going on the Democratic side. And in Iowa, people are forgetting when the Democrats killed off the Iowa caucus, there are 160,000 Iowa Democrat-leaning independents and Democrats who voted in the caucus who have nothing to do. And to vote in a Republican caucus, you show up and say, yeah, I'm a Republican tonight. You can then unregister online very easily. So I think there are going to be 30 or 40,000 civic-minded independents and Democrats who have nothing to do because there's no Democratic caucus who show up. And that's bad for Trump. So I think the media block is a thing. I'm not sure it'll last all the way through December and January. And I think foreign policy is in Nikki's wheelhouse, and she ought to be able to score with it.
Mike Pence got out. I assume that if he'd not gotten out,
right
you'd be Mike Murphy would be saying the exact same thing about him. So I understand the argument. What's the likelihood that Christie, Scott, and DeSantis take your advice in the short term?
Well, if one of them, if Scott doesn't make the debate, I think he's out. And the on to Iowa thing is kind of covered. You always say that. I'm making my last stand in Wyoming. You always have you have to say that to the media every day or they write you out of the race.
Right.
So, but I have some idea what's going on there. And I think he'd like to be on the debate. But I wrote the Bulwark piece. I'm trying to get pressure on these people to step back and stop thinking about what kind of defeat they're going to have, instead what they can do for the greater cause. DeSantis is the hardest one to get out, because they do have nuggets of support. They're declining, but he's in the hunt in Iowa, which makes him a big problem. If he got out, it would be great. But, anybody who's worked with him knows unselfish is not a word you generally laser etch on the history of Ron DeSantis. But if he wants to see Trump beat, it's politics. If you get out now, you got a little leverage. You're a hero. You're the chairman of Nikki Haley's campaign tomorrow. You're moving your bet from you to somebody else. That's not a dumb bet in politics. DeSantis is young. VP, Florida. There are a lot of smart long-term moves they can make if they're smart enough to understand it ain't going to be me. Otherwise, they're damaged goods after they get clobbered in Iowa, and who cares? So if they're thinking strategically and DeSantis is not dumb, they should think about it. Play the smarter long-term game.
Hacks on
Because
tap.
otherwise, Trump wins, he's out to kill you. You got to get the monster before the monster gets you, because you stepped on the monster's toes. Monster doesn't like Scott, doesn't like DeSantis. So, help kill the monster.
Hacks on Tap, the podcast that you co-host. By the way, I'm looking at you. You're looking awfully comfortable in SoCal. It looks good on Mike Murphy. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. A joy.
Thank you. Mike Murphy, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, there it is. The guru says everybody off the island. Oh, no, Nikki Haley, you stay behind.